What about, in terms of the diminishing resources, the state budget that will come out before the next city budget? The city did not do very well in certain areas in the state budget this last time. All the AIM aid was cut, a lot of school aid was cut, which was restored by the federal government's last-minute stimulus. But what are your expectations about the next state budget? Are your priorities to get those things restored, or expect that they will not return? What are your priorities in terms of lobbying on the state budget?
Well, I think with regard to Albany, it's always good to keep expectations low. Perhaps they will be exceeded by reality events. You know, we have managed, this mayor has managed the fiscal house here well. That is not the situation at Albany. I think everyone understands that next year the budget there is going to be even worse than the budget this year in terms of resources. I have every expectation that we will again be in a dogfight to get our fair share. We're not alone in that. I mean, other cities in this state are similarly situated. But you know, I think Stephen has been surprised. Surprised at how much of our lives depend on Albany doing one thing or another, whether it be civil service or procurement. I'm sure he'll be happy to talk about it. But you know, we send a lot of money to Albany, and we sort of expect and depend on them to send our fair share back. And sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot that we did accomplish in the last session in Albany. We got the charter capital, which is a major victory for this mayor, and we believe that more importantly for the kids who live in the schools here. But next year's budget will likely be a bit of a bloodbath.
So Howard kind of briefly introduced this subject. Let me just say there are non-monetary issues that are really important in the future of the city that hopefully the next General Assembly governor will help us take on. I mean, the way the current civil service process is just totally inconsistent with good management. And it's also inconsistent with worker fulfillment. It's just a demeaning process that has everybody in little boxes. But to change a little box, you've got to get permission from Alderman. And I just learned recently that in Alderman, of all ironies, is we pay them $500,000 a year to approve our proposals about civil service change. And in the last year, they've never even said yes or no to any of them. They just go there and then they never come back, right? So it's not only the process is bad, it's bad and then supervised by folks who don't do anything, right? So and that just has to be changed. We have to, and we have a working group on civil service, and we're going to have some very discrete proposals that I think are reasonable. They're not radical. They're designed to help our workers work better and smarter. But we need some relief from the way that operates in Albany. Similarly, the procurement system here, many of you are aware of, is not only agonizing to get through, it's not designed to produce best value. It's designed to buy the cheapest. And it's not designed to buy the cheapest in kind of any coherent way. It's just like thousands of contracts and $17 billion of spending that is definitely not best value spending. But I'm going to exaggerate here, but the law requires us to buy in stupid ways, right? So use stupid in quotes. It's not like that's what, we don't aspire to do that. But if you say, well, why didn't we bid it this way? Why didn't we do it this way? The answer is, well, we're not legally allowed to. So we need to change the procurement laws. We need to change the civil service laws. We need to change the relationship between Albany and New York City. I can definitely understand why in past times they need to have more oversight of the city. Maybe why the legislators would want to have more oversight now, but that can be exercised in a much more professional way than it is. And all of those things come at a price. And you know, the money items that Howard works on are really important. The pension stuff is the most important. But these kind of items that kind of liberate the New York City workforce are really going to be quite important in the future as well.
Did you not have the same tension between the state and the city and the issue of unfunded mandates and home rule in Indianapolis?
All cities go through this. I would say that the differentiating factors here are as follows. There are always home rule issues, although I think actually New York City has less home rule than probably any big city that I've seen in the country in a while. B, and the next governor could change this, the culture of state employees is one of control. It's not one of service to the local governments, right? They're not there actually to help us do our work. They're there to make sure that we follow some set of bewildering rules that nobody can understand, right? And that relationship happens in some states, but not like it happens here. And then you couple that with the fact that there are more rules here than there are anywhere in the world about how public service is accomplished. And so if you have more people overseeing how you use the rules, and their responsibility is not to make sure that you serve the citizens, but that you follow the rules, then you have an enormous cost in that bureaucrat-to-bureaucrat discussion. So there's less home rule, there's more people overseeing our work, they oversee our work in more minute ways than they do in almost any other big city in the country, and that produces kind of a suboptimal result.
I mean, if you Stephen was talking about this before I came in, but if you look at the history is that New York City suffered from significant corruption in the days of Kennedy. Albany felt like they needed to oversee what we did with a heavy hand to ensure that we didn't engage in all sorts of petty corrupt acts. And that made sense in the progressive era. We've now had 9 years of scandal-free government under this mayor. A mayor who is very entrepreneurial, who believes in getting results. And I think it's fair to ask whether or not we can look at some of these rules that were promulgated in a very different era and try to update them in the era that we're actually living in, which is to say, let's let a city that is actually significantly less marred by scandal than Albany have a little bit more power devolved back to it to run its own affairs.
One area where the city and the state are particularly intertwined is the transit system, the MTA. What do you, either of you, what do you see as the solution to the MTA's serious financial problems? Are the mayor's representatives on the board going to support the fare increase proposals? Is there a prospect of trying to find another funding stream this year, like congestion pricing was tried in the past? What do you think we should do about this?
I wouldn't rule out another attempt at congestion pricing. It's not something that we talk a lot about externally with other stakeholders, but I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, the mayor believes in it, thought it was the right thing to do, disappointed that it didn't happen. There may be some people who, looking back on it, wish we could have gotten it done, and they may be willing to revisit it.
Let me answer a slightly different question, which is, so there is this MTA issue and fares and congestion pricing that's important and that we continue to address. There's also a larger issue, I think, or maybe it's not larger, but slightly different, which is what I call the mobility issue, right? How do New Yorkers get around? And if one thinks about public transit, we should think about the bus routes and the cabs and the black cars and where they're allowed to pick up and where the vans can be, right? And so there are ways that we can actually improve mobility in a significant way. I saw this article in the New York edition of the Journal like 2 weeks ago, I think I talked to Howard about, where people are having trouble selling their houses where the bus routes have been discontinued. So the transit availability is one of important convenience to folks, but also directly affects their property values, right? Their ability to get into Manhattan in a reasonable way. And so you've seen that we have this little van pilot. I mean, this is not the answer to the long-term MTA problem. I don't want to say it is the answer, but I would like to suggest that we're working on lots of ways to improve the way people move around the city. And those could be vans, trying to weave through which things. Albany tells us there's a bunch of laws about which vans can do which things and where they can stop. It's kind of weird, but we're trying to get around those. The GPS in the taxis allows one to see that, I get the percentages wrong, but I've seen the dot map that essentially shows that every taxi pickup is in Manhattan. I mean, there's like a few dots here and there around that you can see. So we need to address that. And I like to get some of those bus issues resolved. So a little pilot which has recently started in the 4 routes where we have the vans picking up is a way to think about it. So we're trying to work with MTA. There's some technology issues and there's obviously funding issues, and I hope there'll be some congestion pricing issues, but we shouldn't just rest on our ability to kind of resolve the MTA issues in a traditional way.
Neither of you are going to pick up on the fare increase and what the mayor's position is.
I have not talked to the mayor about that.
Are we gonna be allowed to ask any questions?
Yes. I'm gonna have to skip all these great questions I had because I do want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. But let me just ask one more first, which is, you know, you both come from fairly partisan backgrounds in two opposite parties. One is a strategist for people running for office, and one is the candidate yourself. What's it like to be working together, notwithstanding that history?
Liberating. No, I was joking with Steve yesterday. I said sometimes I sound more like a Republican than he does, and I just had to agree that was true. You know, I feel privileged to be in this position. I love the city. I grew up in this region. Went to school in the city. Was here back and forth between DC in the 90s, and working for this mayor, for this city at this time is a tremendous opportunity. And it is not about partisan politics. It is actually, you know, about getting some of this stuff done. I mean, we've had a fairly policy-laden conversation so far. I hope, you know, I'm happy to continue that, but that's where we spend our time. That's what we spend our time doing.
Since you've already crossed the aisle, are you willing to serve as chief strategist for the Goldsmith mayoral race?
No. It's not that I want Howard to help us, that there is no such thing. So my answer is the same as Howard's. I mean, I think the thing that makes this next couple of years so important, and this next session in Albany so important, is that I can't imagine that this city or any city would have such a remarkable opportunity where policy is more important than politics. And it's a combination of the fact that the mayor accepts and respects different voices, and that he's created this either bipartisan or nonpartisan atmosphere. And it's also, I think, coupled with his view that, you know, if he's willing to take on an issue that he thinks is right despite the politics of it, right? So it's a combination of those two, presents a moment in time for really dramatic work, and the culture that he's created and the folks he's brought around him, and allows a lot of us who are, you know, partisan one lives to be kind of bipartisan, nonpartisan in this city hall.
Mr. Ackman.
Two ideas for you, and this has been a frustration to a lifelong New Yorker, but every once in a while, all too often, we read about these double-dipping pensions of the police officers, the MTA workers, with the last year that they work, they get a vast amount of overtime, and then they are able to vastly increase their permanent pensions, and everybody knows about it, and nobody does anything about it. So it's a tremendous frustration for a lifelong citizen of New York City. The other idea that I have for you, and this is another thing that nothing has been done about for years and years and years, and as an owner of a co-op in New York City, I'm speaking against my own self-interest, but the real estate taxes on single-family houses and co-ops in this city are ridiculously low compared to condominiums and commercial real estate. There's a vast source of revenue there, and probably what should happen is reducing the taxes on commercial real estate and increasing the single-family home taxes, because it's just, I mean, over a period of time, fine, but it's very frustrating when these two obvious sources of revenue on the one side and decreasing costs on the other side, nobody does anything about it.
Let me just say, we've noticed that, and I referred it to the senior political advisor of our team.